Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor of the Herald Democrat, Jason De La Rosa, and you're listening to the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. We are about to enter week 8 out of 11. We are basically 75% of the way through the football season. Everybody making big plays in district, making big moves in district. We will talk about all of the action from last week. A lot of district openers, a lot of interesting results, and we will preview what is going to happen on this Friday night. As we always do, we start from the top, we work our way down in classification, and we will talk about everything that we need to know about for the upcoming football games. And we will start with the Sherman Bearcats and how things are shaping up in District 6-5A, Division 1, as Sherman goes on the road to face Frisco Reedy. Sherman is 2-4 and 1-3 in district after losing 31-17 against Frisco Heritage, and Frisco Reedy comes in at 7-1 and 4-1 in district play with a 52-7 victory over Lebanon Trail. This is a situation where it is getting late early for the Bearcats. They need to make some moves. We talked about how this last game against Frisco Heritage, one of those games that they could keep pace with some of those teams at the top of the standings. Unfortunately, that did not happen as Heritage gets out to the 24-7 lead at halftime, and then they score first in the second half to widen that gap. Sherman gets it down to a two-score game, unable to get any closer there in the fourth quarter. And so they are looking up at 5 teams in the standings right now after that 31-17 loss against Heritage. In that game for the Bearcats, Micah Hunt with a touchdown catch, Kane Bone with a touchdown run, Yahir Ruiz kicks a 40-yard field goal. Leading receiver Colin Macon had 5 catches for 83 yards. Bowen was the leading rusher, 13 carries for 31 yards. Was a struggle on the ground for the Bearcats with just 30 yards on 22 carries. And going into this game against Reedy, who is tied for third place with Heritage, both at 4-1. Lone Star and Frisco are both still undefeated at 4-0. And then you have Wakeland sitting at 2-2. And in fifth place, just outside the playoffs, as we hit this home stretch here in week 8. So Sherman's got a tough road if they're gonna stay in this mix. They've got to win one of the next 2 to probably make that happen. Obviously, if you win this week, you're 1 game back of Reedy, and you still have Wakeland to play. If you're going to try to snake one of those last playoff spots. We saw last year they won their last 2 games. Unfortunately, they had been eliminated at that point, and this is a tough district. I mean, again, you're looking at the 4 teams that are in the playoff position right now combined have a total of 2 losses. And I believe and Reedy's only loss is to Lone Star, which was on a last-second touchdown pass. So that could easily be reversed in the standings. But that's Reedy's only loss in general and on the season. They were ranked earlier in the year, then they lost to Lone Star, and Lone Star took their spot in the rankings. I think Lone Star's 8 or 9 this week, but in that range. And so Reedy's not far behind that pace. And then obviously Heritage, we talked about how they were trying to hold serve, trying to stay close to the top spot because they've got some of those key games for them coming up as well. And unfortunately, it's been a little bit of too little, too late. Coach Allman's talked about all year about 4 quarters and putting that together, and in some cases they've done that, and in some cases they haven't. Whether it's on both sides of the ball or just one. And it's this half, it's the first half this week, it's the second half the next week, and just the inconsistency has been a situation that has hurt them in some key times. Even if they had won the Frisco Centennial game, and were sitting at 2-2, you'd still be a little behind the 8 ball, but you'd be in it, and this would be a really big swing game. So we'll see what happens. It's like I said, it's getting to be where I don't think they can be eliminated this week. But it's gonna come. It'd be very close. And then even if you do win out, you're gonna be 4-4, and that might not be good enough. Again, we saw in this district last year 5-3 was not good enough because of tiebreakers. So Sherman may be in a situation right now where you may have to win out from here, but unfortunately you gotta do it one game at a time, and you are playing, 3 of the 4 teams directly in front of you. You are playing on the schedule, so you can't control your own destiny, but it's gonna take some better play on both sides of the ball to get that done, to stay in the mix till the end. You've got that game against Frisco Liberty last. Right now they're 0-7. They're probably on their way to being 0-9 by the time that they come up here for the season finale. And you want to make that sort of be a layup for you potentially, while some other people are playing some tough opponents. But you got to get a win beyond the win over Lebanon Trail. And that's going to start with a game at Frisco Reedy, and that's going to be at Kuykendall Stadium, formerly Memorial Stadium, the old Frisco Stadium. That's where Sherman's going to be on Friday, and that's also a 7 o'clock start. All of Sherman's games are 7 o'clock starts. That district does 7 o'clock starts. So be aware of that if you're going down there to watch them play in Frisco on Friday night. Moving down to the Denison Yellow Jackets in 7-5A Division 2. They also had a home game that did not go their way this past Friday, and that was a 28-21 loss against Terrell. We talked about this game being a key district matchup in terms of not just a playoff spot, but potentially seeding. And now Terrell has the inside track to a playoff spot and probably the 3rd seed based on the schedule that they've had. If you were to look at the standings, obviously Melissa and Lovejoy are in first place. Crandall is all alone in 3rd at 2-1, while Denison, Princeton, Greenville, and Terrell are all at 1-2. However, like we mentioned, Terrell has played the top 2 teams, and so they control their destiny for the 3rd seed. If they win out, they will be able to do that. And if they beat everybody except for Crandall, then they would get a playoff spot like they did last year and get 4th. In this game, Denison had a 21-15 lead at halftime, and then was unable to hang on to that. It was tied at 21 going to the 4th quarter, and on the first play of the 4th quarter, Terrell was putting together a drive. The first play of the 4th quarter ends up being a touchdown for them, and they're able to nurse that home throughout the 4th quarter. Very frustrating second half for Denison. They had 4 possessions in the second half. 3 ended in interceptions, and 1 ended on a turnover on downs. And it was as close as we thought these teams would be. It was, literally down to the final drive. Denison trying to force overtime and find a way to gain the upper hand in this matchup. Jack Allman led the way for Denison. He had 26 carries for 188 yards. Grant Yerkes, 10 carries for 45 yards and a touchdown. Axel Mitchell got the start at quarterback, 3rd straight game in a row that Denison had a new starting quarterback. He had a touchdown pass to Jaden Crowley, and he also ran for a touchdown. But the good and the bad sort of either canceled each other out, or the bad was a little bit worse, as he had 2 of the 3 interceptions, only threw for 60 yards. And so Denison finds themselves in the exact same spot at this point last year, 1-2, and hosting Melissa, who has been the number one ranked team in the 5A Division II polls all year long. They're coming off a 50-7 win against Mesquite Poteet. And this was a game last year. A lot of people obviously didn't give Denison a whole lot of a chance because they'd already been beaten pretty badly by Lovejoy and Terrell. And if you can't beat those people, how are you going to go down to Melissa and play with that team? And that final score was 54-44. That was a game that was in doubt. In the fourth quarter, Denison gave itself a chance on a couple of occasions to potentially win that game. And the fact that they played them that tough is a good sign, I think, especially for this year, because you can play with them. Obviously when you say, oh my God, we're playing the number one team in the state, how can we beat that team? Well, you played them pretty tough last year, and it's a lot of the same kids. It was a really talented junior class for Melissa last year. Obviously, they're defending district champs because they beat Lovejoy in the last game. Made a good run themselves in the playoffs, and obviously big things certainly expected for them again this year. They've killed everybody they've played. They beat Argyle 50-14. They've handled the business like a number one team should. They put up a ton of points. They don't allow a lot of points. So if you want to play a comparison game, Terrell in their game against Melissa lost 59-28. So if you want to compare that, and again, last week it was 50-7 against Poteet. Poteet hasn't won a game, so that doesn't I don't know necessarily say a whole lot about them, but the path for Denison remains the same. You don't want to say you throw out this game from a record standpoint. I think you want to see the same effort and the same competitiveness that you saw last year, and if you can win that, and if you could stun the world, because no one is going to think you're going to win this game, then that's a huge feather in your cap. But right now the path is the same as it was last year at this point. You're going to have to beat Princeton, whose only win is against Poteet. You're going to have to beat Poteet at the end of the season, who at that point probably going to be 0-9 going into that game, and you've got to beat Crandall, who we said right now is 2-1, but they still have to play Lovejoy and they still have to play Terrell, and so if you're going to be in that mix, one, you're rooting for Terrell to beat Crandall, because you don't want to be in a tiebreaker with Terrell and Crandall in a three-way tie. If you want to make it simple and just get in, but if Crandall beats Terrell, then you're gonna have to hope for some tiebreaker magic, and then it comes down to points and all that other stuff. So, but that's where Denison stands. Nothing has really changed since last year. And again, even if they had won this game, that doesn't guarantee anything. There's almost a pretty good chance that you would have to beat Crandall to get in. Waiting to see what that Crandall-Terrell score, whatever that outcome is going to be next week, because that's the game to watch. On the 20th, when Denison travels down to Princeton, is when Terrell plays Crandall. So Crandall's going to play Lovejoy this week. Obviously, you assume that's a loss. Terrell's going to play Princeton. You assume that's going to be a win for Terrell. So Terrell would get to 2-2. Crandall would get to 2-2. And I would imagine that Greenville is going to be sitting at 2-2 because they'll beat Poteet. But again, Greenville still has to play Melissa, and they still have to play Lovejoy. So With them sitting at 2 losses, that's probably going to get them to 4. And if you're Denison, you already have the tiebreaker over them anyway. So that's where Denison stands. They got a home game against Melissa, top team in the state. A lot of D1 prospects, a lot of D1 commits, and they'll do the best they can. And I think that's all you can ask for. And like I said, if it's a replay of last year, where the game is in doubt and competitive in the fourth quarter, then I think Denison's done its job, and you take that positive momentum into the final essentially month of the season, I guess 3 weeks of the season to win those games, and if you do that, then you'll make the playoffs. So that's where Denison sits in 7-5A Division 2. Moving down to 4A, we'll talk about the Van Alstyne Panthers, who are coming off a 17-7 loss against Aubrey. So Van Alstyne is now 3-3 and 2-1 in district play, and they are hosting Farmersville. Farmersville is 4-1 and 1-1 in district play after they won 55-28 against Gainesville. So this is just as key of a game as last week was for the Panthers. We talked about obviously playing Aubrey. The winner was going to get sole possession of first place, so that's where Aubrey is. They obviously have the inside track to the district title, inside track to a playoff spot, and it was a defensive slugfest. Scoreless at halftime. Aubrey leading 7-0 going to the fourth quarter. Unfortunately, Van Alstyne unable to muster anything outside of a 70-yard touchdown catch by Castor Fonseca from Brady Carson on a little wide receiver pass, halfback pass type play. That made it 14-7, and then Aubrey's able to kick a field goal to make it a 10-point game, and that's how that ended. I said going in, I didn't really know what to expect out of Aubrey because obviously they were 0 for district. They had struggled against some good competition, but then they had won their first 2 district games really well. And I don't know if anybody, I didn't see 17-7. I didn't see a low scoring kind of game. I thought there'd be a little more offensive action in this one. But so you look at the stats. Fonseca had 3 catches for 101 yards. Carson, in addition to the touchdown pass, had 6 catches for 58 yards. But it was one of those games where kind of opposite. Van Alstyne really struggled to run the ball, 19 carries for 65 yards. Aubrey didn't really do a whole lot on the ground, or excuse me, in the air with 58 yards passing. And it was just good solid defense across the board. For 3+ quarters. And I think right now those are the 2 best teams. I think this game between Farmersville and Van Alstyne is going to go a long way to solidify that. This district right now does not make a whole lot of sense to me. I see scores, and it's one of those districts where people beat people, and then you see the next week, and then they lose to people that lost to the people you beat. It's been really weird with some of the scores early on in this district. And so this is obviously a swing game. Farmersville is sitting at 1-1, along with Bridgeport and Crum. Gainesville's at 1-2, Sanger's at 0-3. So Sanger's got to get on their horse if they want to stay in the race, because they're about to fall off the pace pretty quickly. They do have the bye this week, so they'll have to see what things shake out. And Bridgeport and Gainesville play each other. So that's obviously another key one with sort of this middle, the sitting in the middle. Aubrey and Crum are playing, so I assume Crum is going to lose in that one. But Crum's played people tough. I mean, they played Van Alstyne tough. So who knows? The way this district is going, that would be a surprise. But I guess maybe not, depending on how things shake out there. But Van Alstyne is exactly in the same spot that they were last year. Starting 2-0, lose to Aubrey, and then beat everybody else. And if you do that again, you're going to get second place. You can hope that Aubrey gets tripped up by somebody, and maybe there's a three-way tiebreaker potential. But more than likely, Aubrey's as Coach Miller said, going into that game, we all know Aubrey's the team to beat. And nobody's beaten them yet. So until somebody does, that's their district title to lose, and I don't think they're going to lose it now. But again, in this district, who knows? So a key game for the Panthers. We'll see how they bounce back. Obviously, it's one of those things where you look at games and you say, is it better to lose a close game, a hard-fought game, or is it just, you just get your doors blown off and you can flush it and move on? It'll be interesting to see if it lingers. And Farmersville, it's going to be interesting to see with them because they started out, they came into District 3-0. They did have a game. Get canceled on them in non-district, but they were undefeated coming into district play. And then the first week they lost, I think it was to Bridgeport, and that was kind of surprising. And then they bounced back in a big way against Gainesville, who a lot of people thought was going to be a district title contender and a playoff contender. And Gainesville's now 1-2, so they obviously bounced back, got a little momentum, and obviously they know what's at stake too because I think you could say the winner of this game has the inside track for the second seed, and Farmersville is still going to have to play Aubrey, so they could set things up nicely for them if they're able to come to Van Alstyne and get a win. So like I said, it's the most interesting game I think in that district. Van Alstyne hosting Farmersville in 5-4A Division II action on Friday night. Moving down to 3A, we've got some games at the Division I districts that have been critical in terms of seeding and district titles and all that in the past. We'll see if they have that effect this year. So we'll talk about Whitesboro in District 4 3A Division 1. The Bearcats pull off a comeback in the fourth quarter in a game that they're down to Peaster 14-0 at halftime. They're down 21-7 in the fourth quarter, but they're able to pull that game out 22-21. So they are now 4-3 and 3-0 in district play. Peaster drops to 1-5 and 0-2. This was a game again, kind of defensy. 14-0 at halftime, 14-7 going to the fourth quarter. Clay Hermes throws for 225 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he scores the 2-point conversion that ends up being the difference instead of kicking the extra point, going to overtime in the closing minutes. Coach Fagan and them decide to go, hey, we're on the road, we're close game, we got all the momentum, let's go for 2, take the lead and get the win, and they were able to do that. Carter Sluter, 6 catches for 162 yards and 2 touchdowns. Brett Donaldson, 4 catches for 60 yards and a score. Max Parker with 13 carries and 58 yards to lead on the ground. Whitesboro's defense forces 4 turnovers to help keep them in the game, and just a huge win. We talked about going in about if you win these 3, you're essentially guaranteed a playoff spot. It's not official yet. I think if Whitesboro can win this week, and we'll talk about that game here in a second, then they can clinch a playoff spot. But they're probably going to clinch the playoff spot next week when they're on their bye week. It's just a matter of games, the games getting played, because technically right now that they could end up in 5th place. But you've beaten the bottom 3 teams, and you have the top 3 of the top 4 teams left. So it's just a matter of the weeks passing. And like I said, I think it's It's going to happen again because I think it happened last year on the bye week. Because Whitesboro this week has Brock coming to town. They'll be hosting them. Brock is 3-3 and 2-0 in district play. Obviously, the overall record we've talked about with Brock in the past is a bit deceiving because of the tough schedule that they played. Pleasant Grove, Gunner. They played some heavyweights, and they've been unable to beat those teams. But we saw last year they were 0-4 coming into district. They actually were a little bit better this year. They actually won one of those games. But they were 0-4. They got to district play. They won 11 games in a row and made the state championship game before losing by a field goal to Franklin. So there's nothing to assume that they don't think they can do the exact same thing. They are coming off their bye last week. They have kicked the snot out of their two district opponents in case people wanted to think, oh, this is not the same old Brock. They opened district play with a 78-0 win over Boyd, and then they beat Peaster 61-0 going into the bye week. So going to be a tough task for for Whitesboro this week against Brock. It's been an interesting couple years. Obviously, these two teams have met in district. They've also met in the state quarterfinals. Brock has won all those meetings, and this is one of those where I think they're going to be coming up here thinking we can do the same thing. Brock has never lost to Whitesboro. They're 7-0, and so this is going to be it's going to be a tough one for Whitesboro. It's been tough, all the times that they've played. No matter where they've played, whether it's at home, on the road, at a neutral site in the playoffs. Yes, a couple of those games have been close, but Brock has always found a way. And then obviously when you look at these standings coming into this week, both Whitesboro and Paradise are 3-0, and Brock is 2-0. So obviously somebody's going to get their first district loss here. And both of them still have to play Paradise as well. So it's starting to take shape. I think it's pretty obvious that the playoff teams are going to be Whitesboro, Paradise, Brock, and Ponder. Peaster, Pilot Point, and Boyd still do not have any district wins. So that means they're just piling up tiebreaker losses to the teams in front of them. And I think it'll really come into focus after this week because obviously we'll see the outcome of the Whitesboro-Brock game. Boyd is playing Ponder. That's obviously a critical game. And Peaster's going to play Paradise. I think Paradise is going to roll in that one, and Pilot Point's on the bye. So there's a chance that the bottom three are still winless after this week, and like I said, Whitesboro is probably going to end up clinching their playoff spot after a bye, and then it's just going to come down to seeding going into their final three games. So it's a tough one. I'm sure both teams have it circled for a variety of reasons, but like we said, Whitesboro's done exactly what they've needed to do to this point. They've beaten the bottom three teams in the standings. The schedule was set up well for them. This game was obviously a little closer for comfort, but they found a way to pull it out, and that's what good teams do, and that's what playoff teams do. I'm sure Peaster came in thinking we have a chance to stay in the mix or get in the mix if we're able to beat Whitesboro, but Whitesboro made enough plays at the end to pull that out. So some good for them to do that and give themselves some cushion going into the final couple weeks of the season. And then in District 5 3A Division 1 for Pottsboro, they're going to have a huge game after they beat Bonham 56-0 in a game that all the scoring was done in the first half, and it was one of those get out of Dodge as quick as you can games, and hopefully everybody stays healthy. Again, Major McBride leading the way, 6 carries for 172 yards and four touchdowns. He also caught 3 passes for 151 yards and a touchdown as well. We saw use of 2 quarterbacks. Kyle Trulock, 4 of 9 passing for 220 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And Caden Humphrey, 2 of 3 passing for 73 yards and a touchdown. Humphrey also ran for a score as well. He had 6 carries for 34 yards. Receiving wise, after McBride, Cameron Saunders made his lone catch count for 56-yard touchdown. Carson Butcher had 2 catches for 56 yards, and Brady Fulton made his catch count as a 30-yard touchdown as well. It was a lot of big plays. It was a lot of short drives, like 1-play drives or 2-play drives. Pottsboro only ran 33 plays. So obviously you can tell how quick the clock may have been running in the second half. And they held bottom to 156 total yards. Got a couple interceptions. Only 9 first downs, which is what you're supposed to do if you're a top 10 team in the rankings and you're playing a team that's on that was on a 5-game losing streak coming in. That's what you're supposed to do. And in the case of their matchup for this week, much like last week, the focus was across the state was on Gunner Bells to see how that would come out. If this is not the game in 3A Division 1, I don't know if there is a better one or a more impactful one, because you have Pottsboro, who is ranked number 9 in the rankings, going on the road to face Winsboro, who is number 5 in the rankings. So you have 6-0 and 2-0 in District Pottsboro against 7-0 and 3-0 in District Winsboro. This was a game last year that decided the district title. Pottsboro won 36-35 in a crazy comeback to win that game, and they finished first, and that was Winsboro's only district loss to finish second. And so I think a lot of people are expecting that to be a similar type of a game. Just because you just have talent all over the place on these teams, and I think that's the expectations when you have 2 teams that are accustomed to winning. They're putting up big numbers on both sides of the ball. Winsboro won last week 44-0 against Mount Vernon, and this is obviously just a huge game for both teams. Obviously, the winner is going to have the upper hand in district play. You look at the standings, and after them, Commerce is sitting at 2-1, Mineola's at 1-1, Mount Vernon's at 1-2, and it can really tighten up. I think this is such a fascinating game because both teams are just. Man, I don't know. I mean, I could see this being one of those crazy scores, and I could see it being a defensive struggle. I mean, like I said, this is one that people are going to have their eye on. It is a 7:00 start. If you're planning to make the trip out to Winsboro, be aware of that. But this should be a slugfest. If there is one thing I would say, maybe from Winsboro's standpoint, if it does come down to a close game, is they don't really have a lot of close games, and so I don't know if that makes a difference when you look at a team like Pottsboro that's had a couple of close games. Obviously they've gotten better against teams as the season's gone on. The gap has widened in a couple of their games. But when you look at their ability in games that are close to find a way to win, I wonder if that might be an edge for a game. And again, like we talked about last year's game, you can come back and win a game against an opponent like that. So definitely, if it's not the game to watch, it's one of the games to watch. With Pottsboro going to Winsboro, with plenty at stake in District 5 3A Division 1 action. Moving down to Division 2, we will start in District 6 3A Division 2, and that's where you will find SNS. They opened district play with a 47-0 loss against Callisburg, and Valley View outdid them by just a scotch by losing to Holiday 60-0. And so SNS comes into this game at 0-6 and obviously 0-1 in district play, and Valley View is sitting at 1-5 on the season and 0-1 after losing that game last week. So this is one of those games where the winner will be in a decent position to make a playoff push. If we're looking at teams that after the first week, SNS and Valley View are tied with City View at 0-1, while Holiday, Callisburg, and Henrietta are the 1-0 teams. And so this is more or less a must win on both sides if you're going to stay in the race. It will be interesting to see obviously Holiday and Henrietta play. I would assume that means that's a Henrietta loss, and Callisburg is playing City View, and so if Callisburg takes care of business there, then that means the winner of this game is probably going to be tied with Henrietta for third place, depending on how things, if that's the form that we think it might go. We continue to talk about it. Obviously, both these teams have struggled to score. SNS a little more so, but obviously they're both coming off shutout losses. And it's going to be interesting to see. Valley View has a new head coach this year. Coach Smart came down from, or I guess technically up from Sanger, to take over there. Valley View had some kids transfer out who were a big part of last year's, I don't want to say success, but they're not as explosive offensively as they were last year. And obviously I think that's graduation and transfers has hurt in that regard. So the only question is who's gonna pull this out and control their destiny. Hopefully, it's a situation where SNS can put some stuff together. They've been okay, and I feel like it's been kind of a broken record, and we'll probably say this when we talk about Wet right here in a little bit. They've been okay. They've been okay defensively. It's just that they've been, you're chasing from behind, and you're not being able to put up a lot of points. And that's ultimately the biggest issue for the Rams this year is not being able to put up points. They've scored they've only scored 9 points in the last 4 games. And that obviously you're not gonna win games when you're scoring 3.5 points a game. So you've gotta, or I guess that's 2.5 points a game. So you've got to find a way to get that going. I think this is a game that they could do that, but we'll see. I don't know if it matters that it's here, but we'll see what happens when SNS hosts Valley View in a key 6-3A Division 2 matchup because of what it means towards the bottom of the playoff picture. The winner of this is in that mix, and hopefully the Rams are able to do that on Friday night. Moving over to District 8-3A Division 2. Obviously, we have a couple teams to talk about in this district, and we have an all local matchup for the second week in a row, and that is Gunner going to Howe. Gunner is 6-0 and 1-0 in district after they beat Bells 64-6, and Howe is 3-3 overall and 0-1 after they lost 56-22 against Leonard. So we'll get the Howe portion out of the way first. So this was a game that was tied at 8 after the first quarter. And so I think you're thinking, okay, everybody's settling in, whatever, blah blah blah. Nip and tuck the whole way, and then Leonard exploded in the middle two quarters. They scored 4 times in the second quarter, 3 more times in the third to break this game wide open, and win a game that they lost last year. So obviously already we have a result in this district that was flipped from a year ago. Howe gets 13 carries and 62 yards and a touchdown from Caden Dunn. Knox Bounds returned a kickoff 80 yards for a touchdown. And Braden Ulmer had 4 carries for 35 yards and a touchdown as well. So Howe is off its pace. That was able to get it into the playoffs last year. And obviously it doesn't get any easier by having to host the defending state champion, not just the defending district champion, but the defending state champion. And Gunner put up a I don't know if it was a statement performance, but it was a game that obviously was not at all like last year's 24-14 win over Bells. In this one, Gunner's up 42-0 at halftime. I guess that's 50. Is that no? What is that? 55? No, 57. I can't do math in my head. 57-0 after 3 quarters. And if it wasn't against a local team or whatever, you would say you could say it anyway. It's the same old Gunner performance. They spread the ball around. I looked at the numbers. I think they had 11 kids carry the ball, and 8 of them had touchdowns. They ran for 345 yards. They threw for 188. They held Bells down until the fourth quarter, where the Panthers were able to avoid the shutout. But again, just you look at the scoring, and it's one guy has 2 touchdowns, and then it's a bunch of other guys just getting on the board themselves. Brock Body was the guy with the multiple touchdowns this week. 15 carries for 107 yards and a touchdown, and he also caught a 16-yard touchdown pass. Walker Overman didn't have to do a lot on the ground. He had 1 carry. It went for 36 yards and a touchdown. But he was 15 of 20 passing for 129 yards and a score and a touchdown pass. Let's see. Jake Rathbone, 6 carries for 55 yards and a score. Braden Hinton, 7 carries for 50 yards and a score. Let's just see. Cannon Lindbergh, 4 catches for 53 yards. Just running down the guys who scored touchdowns. Jay Martin had a touchdown run. Cade Dodson had a touchdown run. Hayden Farrell had a touchdown run. Dylan Tokars had a touchdown run. Just doing what they do, spreading the ball around. I think, I said 11 guys had carries, and I think there were 10 different receivers that had catches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, 10 different guys that caught passes. And again, just a typical Gunner game. Force 3 turnovers. Hold an opponent to under 200 yards. single digits in scoring, and they're you know they're on a one-way train to at least the region final, if not the state semifinals. We talked about, obviously they beat Brock. That was a game people had circled. I think people had this game circled as well. And then they go and do that. And again, I don't know. There's nobody left in this district who I think can play with them. And then you talk about getting in the playoffs, and whatever the bracket's going to look like, there's a decent chance. They're not tested for another 6 weeks, 7 weeks. I mean, that's how good this program is. I think we've mentioned it in the past. There are some people who think this is the best collection of talent, the best team that this program has put together since this run started in 2016. I'll say this too, is that they did that last week without two key guys in Mitchell Gage and Colin Peacock. Gage is out for the season with an injury. Peacock maybe he should be back at some point in the playoffs, assuming there are no setbacks. They were both injured against Brock. And so like you just roll in the next guy, and the next guy's ready to go, and they pick up. It's a machine over there. They haven't had. But the Brock game right now was their closest game, and they won that 135-12. Every other game, they've basically, the second closest game after that was the win over Walnut Grove. That was a 40-point win. That's the only game they've allowed more than 12 points, and they gave up 24. And that was, again, we're talking about, they played a 5A program that was 5 times their size. So they've got it rolling. And Howe's up next. And again, if you're everybody else in this district, you've got to hope everybody loses to them so they're on the same footing. And then it's what you do against the other people, because it's looking like they're going to roll to another district title after beating Bells. And then Bells, we can jump right into them because they travel to Blue Ridge. So Bells is now 4-1, 0-1 in district play. Blue Ridge is 3-3. They won their district opener at 28-8 against Lone Oak. And this now becomes an interesting game, because how is Bells going to handle bouncing back? Again, we've talked about, is it better to lose a game like that 64-6? You have trouble moving the ball. You get a touchdown from Easton Branham on a short run in the fourth quarter, so you're not shut out. But you really struggle doing what you do. They only rushed for 187 yards. Easton Helgren had 8 carries for 73 yards. And then everything else was kind of a slog for the guys behind him. And is it better to lose like that? You just got whipped and you move on, you flush it and you move on. Or, is it worse to have the loss they had last year when it was 24-14? And you're like, man, we know we could have played with these guys. We could have beat these guys. And it hasn't mattered in this district. We've talked about, Gunner beats everybody, and then Bells beats everybody but Gunner. So as much as we can sit here and say Gunner has a lock on first, Bells has had the lock on second. And I think until somebody can beat them, that's their lot in life, is to, win their final 4 games, be 4-1 in district play, and get the second seed. But this is an interesting one, because Blue Ridge is interesting to me in that they've sort of been up and down. You look at some of their scores one week and you're like, oh, okay, I see we'll see what's going on there. And then the next week they put up a score and you're like, I have no idea what happened there. So we talked about this last week against Lone Oak. It was going to be an interesting score because Lone Oak had been better. Lone Oak was awful last year. Everybody knew they were going to be in last place. They won a couple games coming into district, which is they didn't have last year. And obviously this is, you see 28-8. I would say the good thing is, you held Lone Oak to 8 points. That's obviously a good thing. I would say you only scored 28, so that makes me wonder there. But obviously, I would imagine that if you're Blue Ridge, you think if you see that score between Bells and Gunner, maybe you're thinking you can pick them off and be in position not just to be a playoff team this year after getting left out last year. Leonard was the team that got let out last year. But then we're talking potentially about Leonard and Blue Ridge battling for second place, and then Bells is scrambling because they're at 0-2. So Bells has not been 0-2 in district since 2013. I would not expect that to happen. But the way things went last week, I would imagine that if you're Blue Ridge, you see a wounded animal, and you're going to try to take advantage of that. So that I think with I hate to say, unfortunately, with Leonard playing Lone Oak this week, I think this is obviously Bells gets this is the game to watch in the district, just because of who it's against and the other games. I think everybody knows who's going to win those pretty handily. This is the one that you can look at and say, okay, what's the score going to be, and I'll react accordingly once we see that with Bells going to Blue Ridge on Friday night to round out the 3A games. Moving down to 2A, we'll talk about District 6 2A Division 1, which also kicked off district last week. We had an all-local matchup last week. We have one this week. The one this week is Tom Bean traveling to Whitewright. This is a game that has Tom Bean at 3-3 and 0-1 in district after they lost 33-6 against Tioga, and Whitewright is 2-4 and 0-1 after they lost 7-6 against Nakona. So let's talk about the Whitewright game first, because much like the Aubrey Van Alstyne game, you want to talk about a defensive slugfest. This was scoreless for 3 quarters. Nakona gets a 1-yard touchdown run from Brady McCaslin, and then Whitewright's able to score and late and get on the board with a 2-yard touchdown run by Kenneth York. And then they go to kick the extra point, and it's a bobbled snap, and they can't get the kickoff, and that's how you get 7-6 with all the action in the fourth quarter. So much like Whitewright's 7-6 win against SNS, where everything happened in the first quarter, everything happened here in the fourth quarter. York finishes with 20 carries for 85 yards. Ian Travis had 9 carries for 53 yards. Tyler Ball had 4 catches for 45 yards. And again, we talk about Whitewright. They've been really good on defense. They just have had trouble scoring. They won a game 7-6. They've lost a game 7-6, and it's just been a struggle for them to fine tune a new offense. They've had some flashes, they've had some moments, but unfortunately they just haven't been able to string some games together on that side of the ball, and the defense has been keeping them in games. Nakona is undefeated on the season. They came in averaging a ton of points. They were consistently putting up, just kind of looking at their scores, 42 points, 55 points, 49 points, 64 points. They were putting up big numbers. I mean, to hold them to 7 points, and to not really even do it with, turnovers or something. You can't sit here and say, oh, Nakona had, 7 turnovers or something, and that's why that happened. They held them, they went toe-to-toe and held them down. They just couldn't do anything themselves. And obviously, one miscue cost them from going to overtime and potentially winning that game. So that's the Whitewright side of it. Tom Bean is coming off that 33-6 loss against Tioga, where they didn't score until the second half, and it was a game, that you don't want to say it was only 21. Is that 21? Yeah, 21-0 at halftime. And then Tom Bean gets on the board in the third quarter. Of course, by then it's late in the third quarter. At that point, it was 27. 27-0 Tioga. Tom Bean, didn't get to 100 yards of offense. Had 3 turnovers. Didn't go really well for the Tomcats for the district opener. But I still think they're in that position where they can they're gonna affect the playoff race in some fashion. Obviously, Tioga's defending district champs. They've got a lot of expectations there. And again, I think you're sitting with this Tom Bean team. They've already won more. We talked about last week. They've coming off the bye. They've already won more games than they did last year. It's now I think they're probably thinking, hey, can we get 2 wins and get to 5-5? Can we be 5-5 by the end of the season? And I think if you're going to do that, this is the game that you've got to try to do that. And obviously it's a big rivalry game. Right down, neighbors right down the highway. What can you do going on the road? After struggling last week. I think this has a chance to be a good game. I think or at least a close game. I don't know. I mean, maybe a low-scoring game on both sides, but that could definitely be interesting. With Tom Bean going to Whitewright for 6-2A Division I action on Friday night. The other game in the district, obviously involving Tioga. They are going to Alvord. Tioga is 4-2. Obviously after the win over Tom Bean, and 1-0 in district, and Alvord is 4-1 in overall, 1-0 in district. They won a close game, 16-13 against Trenton. So the big thing with Tioga was last week we did not know how they were going to react after being off for essentially 3 weeks. Was it going to be that rest better than the rust of not playing? And they were able to put together a pretty good performance. Obviously over 400 yards offense. Hayden Hilliard leading the way in the passing department. He goes 33 of 41 for 267 yards with a couple of touchdowns, 2 of them to be precise, and an interception. He also ran for 2 scores. Jonathan Hernandez, 8 carries for 53 yards. Jonah Grubbs, 8 for 52 yards. Cade Maldonado had a touchdown catch. He also returned a punt, 65 yards for a score. Johnny Dorpinghouse led in receiving, 7 catches for 72 yards. Gage Anderson had a good night from scrimmage. Had 5 carries for 40 yards, had 6 catches for 40 yards, and a touchdown receiving. And like we said, they did a good job in shutting down Tom Bean's offense. Just giving up the lone touchdown there late in the third quarter, forcing 3 turnovers, holding an opponent to barely 100 yards. And so that was encouraging to see. Like we said, we didn't really know what Tioga was going to look like just because they were off for so long, and sometimes that's a problem. But in the end, they turned out to be, that's a good start to your title defense. The fact that Alvord played a close game, I don't know what that means. Obviously, they're 4-1 on the season. Like I mentioned, they've had a bunch of close games. They're 4-1. They could probably easily be 1-4 or 0 for maybe. 13-12 over Olney, 17-14 over Valley View. Obviously, this last week, 16-13 against against Trenton. I mean, that's 3 of the 4 wins right there. That are like just super close. A handful of plays goes the other way type of deal. So I don't know what that means. I mean, obviously, I guess it means if it's a close game this week, they know how to handle it because they've been in close games. But they've really struggled to put up points despite the fact that they're 4-1. They had 59 points in one game, and that's over half of their season total, just in the one game. So they're barely averaging, what's that? Maybe 12 points in the other 4 games. So I don't know. The fact that it's at Alvord, maybe that means something. We'll see. But this was a game last year that Tioga won 35-14. Alvord's pretty, they're good enough to make the playoffs. They've made the playoffs every year since 2014. And I think they're probably in line to make the playoffs in this district. I just don't know if they're a team that can push for the top spot. I would put Nakona in that regard. If I was picking somebody that was going to be able to maybe challenge Tioga for the district title, it would be Nakona over Alvord. But you never know if Alvord's the kind of team that mucks things up and makes you play these defensive slugfests. Maybe that's just their style. I don't know. So we'll see how that goes with Tioga going on the road to Alvord in 6-2A Division I play. A couple more games on the schedule. The last one in 2A, we have Collinsville hosting Era. Collinsville is 5-1 and 2-0 after they won last week 40-17 against Celeste, and Era is 1-5 and 1-2 after they lost 41-14 against Lindsay. As things are shaping up in this district, Collinsville and Munster are the only 2 undefeateds left. Celeste is now 2-1, and Santo is at 1-1. Everybody else has at least 2 losses. So the game last week against Celeste, we said it was great offense against great defense. Who's going to find a way to win the game? And the offense won out in this one. This was a 13-10 game at halftime, and Collinsville scored 3 times in the third quarter to break it open, and they win 40-17. Again, they do it through the air because that's what Collinsville does. And in this case, Logan Jenkins, 37 of 49 passing for 349 yards, had 5 touchdowns and an interception. His favorite target in this one was Colin Barnes, 8 catches, 132 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Rylan Newman, 10 catches for 108 yards. Landon Carpenter, 7 catches for 53 yards. And Carter Scott returns after getting hurt in the first game. He was back, had a touchdown pass among 3 catches for 8 yards in this one to get back into it. And then Parker Wells added a touchdown on the ground to round out the effort by Collinsville. So again, that's a nice solid win. We talked about the last year against Celeste. It came down to the last drive. It was a really close game. A little more breathing room this year. And you're facing a team in Era this week that you beat 76-6 last year. Era's not had a winning record since 2018. The last 5 wins for Collinsville against Era, they've scored at least 49 points. I think you're looking at a similar situation. This is also a game that's at 7 o'clock on Friday. The only thing I would say, and I don't think it's going to matter, but you have to throw it out there, of course. Is this a trap game? You're coming off a big win over, one of your key contenders for your spot as district champion. You took care of business there. And if you look ahead to next week, you have Santo, and then the week after that you have Munster. So you have the other two contenders all around this matchup against Era that should probably go your way. And so that would be the only concern is there a trap game? Now last year there was no trap game. They won by 70. And I would expect that's going to happen again. But that would be the only thing to potentially look out for. But again, Collinsville rolling. They're still number 5 in the 2A Division II rankings. And they've got the two big tests coming up. But they're in a good spot to continue staying on top of the district standings the rest of the way. But they got those two big ones in the next 2 weeks after this one. So let's see them stay focused, do that, take care of business, and then play the games that'll really decide some seeding over the next couple weeks. But that's Collinsville hosting Era in 8-2A Division II action on Friday night, again at 7 o'clock. If you're going to get there for kickoff, be advised it is not 7:30, it is 7 o'clock. And the last game we'll talk about, we don't have a recap because Texoma Christian did not play last week. They had one of their byes. They will go on the road and play Crowley Nazarene. Texoma Christian 3-3 overall and 0-1 in district play. Crowley Nazarene 5-2 overall, 1-1 in district play after they lost last week, 52-28 against Prestonwood North. So the best place probably to talk about Texoma Christian here is standings wise. Prestonwood is 2-0. That's who Texoma Christian's losses to, and they, like we said, they beat Nazarene Christian. Because it's such a small district, everybody has kind of wacky schedules. Obviously, like Texoma Christian had the bye last week, so did Azel Christian. This week, Prestonwood North does not play a district game. They're going to play Fannondale. But TCS has, like we said, Crowley, Nazarene, and Bethesda Christian is going to play Azel Christian. We'll know a whole heck of a lot after this week. Bethesda Christian has not played a district game yet, and Azel Christian is 0-1 after losing to Nazarene. So this is sort of the big week. It's going to go a long way to see who makes the playoffs. Obviously, Prestonwood is in the driver's seat for the district title, and they only probably really need only one more win to lock that up. We've got to see what Bethesda Christian looks like. They're 1-5. If they can pull off something against Azel Christian, obviously that's a key game because Azel Christian's already 0-1. So that's kind of where things stand in that district. It's going to be interesting with Texoma Christian. All their games left are on the road, so that maybe makes things a little tougher for them to get in the playoffs. But I think it's one of those situations where, depending on how things go this week, you win your last two, you should probably be in. You win your last two, you get third place. If something crazy happens over the last couple of weeks, then we're talking about tiebreakers and this and that and the other thing. So we'll be interested to see what happens, especially this week in that TAPS Division III District 2, just to see how things start to line up. Prestonwood's in really good shape. If Crowley Nazarene wins this week, I think you can pencil those two in for the playoffs. And then the question is who's going to be in the battle behind them, and this week's going to go a long way towards that. So that's a look back at Week 7. That's a look at all the games we have coming up this week in Week 8. Enjoy whatever game you're going to. Be safe. Cooler weather. We're excited about that. That looks like that's on tap for this week and perhaps the rest of the season. And thanks for listening as always. You can follow us on social media. Obviously, Herald Democrat Facebook page, the All-Texomaland Facebook page, where we post all the articles and all the info you need to know. about the high school stuff, especially the All-Texomaland. If you're just interested in that, follow that. Follow me on Twitter or follow me on X at Jason De La Rosa. You can get some stuff there as well. And as always, thanks for tuning in. It's a busy time of year. There's a lot going on. We got football's winding down, but volleyball's also winding down. We got playoff races there. Cross country, we got district meets. People getting ready for the regional meets later this month. Basketball's around the corner. It's crazy to think we're in week 8 of football. The first and second week of November is right around the corner, and that means girls basketball kicks off, and then the week later boys basketball starts. So it's here. It's that busy time of year. There's a lot going on, and we'll try to bring you the best info, so you know what's going on, who's doing well, and all that sort of good stuff. So again, thanks for tuning in, and come on back next week for the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast.